All right, so we're going to get rolling, and I'm Rachel Gold with Ingenuity, and Liz Kuntz is here with me.
Hello. Welcome to the Rachel and Liz Roadshow.
Yes.
We're taking it online today. Usually Rachel and I travel all over the country to sunny places like Cormorant, Minnesota, or Cormorant, North Dakota. Cormorant, Minnesota. Population
965.
So today we're taking it online. We're excited to be here.
Yes, and we'll introduce ourselves a little more fully in a minute. But first, I really wanted to thank you for attending. You know, I know that there's a lot of other places you could be, a lot of other work you could be doing. So thank you for taking the time to learn about this topic. I hope all of you who are in Minnesota or near Minnesota are inside and warm and cozy. And, you know, whether ROI of branding is something that you wondered about because of past experiences, or maybe you're planning some campaigns in the future and you want to get prepared, we really hope that we'll walk you through and answer all of your questions today. We do love to take questions, and there's a questions pane on your control panel for the webinar software. So if you have questions at any point, just type them in for us, and we'll try to answer them as best we can as we go along. All right, the introducing ourselves portion. All right, we're about to introduce ourselves. There we go. It was a slight technical glitch. So I'm Rachel Gold. That's what I look like, and I'm really dressed up. So just picture me that way if you would. I'm a communications consultant with Ingenuity Marketing Group. I have a master's degree in writing. So I'm very concerned about how messages convey themselves, you know, in the written word or through social media and online. I tend to be a strategic thinker and idea person, and I love to train people in technology and in development as professionals. And one of the things Liz and I decided we should share with you are some recent ROI experiences from our personal lives. So I can let you know that on Lucky Friday the 13th this month, I went and played some poker in a tournament with friends. And my ROI for that evening, because I won 2 rounds, was approximately 160%.
She didn't spend any of that on anybody here at Ingenuity. No free coffees, nothing. So I'm Liz Kuntz. I am a marketing consultant at Ingenuity Marketing Group, and a lot of what that means is that I am in charge of overseeing and setting strategy with clients, and then managing the client relationship to make sure that the strategy and the tactics we decide need to happen to get that strategy done get done on time and on budget. So part of that, we do a lot of branding with our clients, and so I'm essentially tasked at overseeing the branding process and making sure that it fits in line with what the firm's trying to accomplish, and then everything that we do with the firm after we set the branding process, making sure that it's getting implemented as we go. So my favorite ROI example, and mine's from the past year, so I teach yoga as a hobby job on Friday mornings. And if we consider what I paid to do my yoga teacher training this year, the money I made teaching yoga, and what I saved in not having to go to the chiropractor or use Xanax all year because I do yoga so often, that my ROI on yoga teaching was about 450%.
So I think we've definitively proven early in this webinar that the ROI for yoga is higher than the ROI for poker, though I think the engagement metrics for both is probably pretty similar. So you can take your pick.
All right, so before we get going, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page about how we're defining branding. The definition that you're seeing on the screen right now is a classic definition of branding, but it mostly speaks to product branding, and we really want to talk a lot about service branding, service firms, and how they brand, and it's a little bit different. So we at Ingenuity agree that the brand, yes, it's your logo and your colors and all those things that you can actually see, but for service firms, it is largely about the experience a client has with you. So a lot of your brand is about your people, their knowledge, and even their personality. So this makes a brand even more important because there's no physical thing to brand when we're talking about a service firm. So being able to describe your services and how they're different becomes even more important when you're branding for a service firm.
So for example, one example that we often give in our branding trainings is to talk about the McDonald's Big Mac. Not only is it something that, you know, when I say it, you probably know exactly what it is. You've probably eaten one, hopefully not too recently, or too many of them. And some of you, if you have been in a McDonald's recently, you're probably experiencing the memory of their branded smell. Next to Cinnabon, McDonald's has one of the best branded smells in the world. So, if you're producing something like a Big Mac, it's really easy to tell people what they're getting. If you're selling accounting services, legal services, engineering, it's so much harder to tell people what they're getting. And because those relationships are so long-term, it's equally important to tell them the less tangible pieces of the service relationship they're entering into, how you're going to deliver the services in addition to which services you're going to deliver. Those are crucial components of a service firm's brand. All right, I wanted to start with some good, strong graphics early on.
Really, Rachel just really loves cats, so she just wanted to find a way to put in a cat photo.
Yeah, it's true. I wanted to get a cat photo in early on. So this is to show, services can also be kind of boring to talk about sometimes. I'm sorry to have to say that because we personally love accounting and engineering, for example. But sometimes you kind of get that yawning cat effect when you try to describe what you do to people. So a strong brand also has the effect you see on the right-hand side of the slide. It's easier to talk about. It's easier for unsophisticated clients to describe to other people, to refer, to really get that word-of-mouth messaging going on. All right, other reasons to have a strong brand. And I should let you guys know, as we go through this, we're going to talk about a little bit more about why I have a strong brand and kind of an overview of return on investment and return on marketing investment. And then we're going to show a bunch of examples and some criteria for how you know you have a strong brand. And we're going to finish up with possibly more about metrics than any person should ever want to listen to. I want to start early on also acknowledging you guys as an audience, because when we asked if we sounded good, like half of you messaged us. So I really appreciate getting that kind of feedback. So again, feel free to ask anything as we go along. All right. Why have a strong brand? In addition to better word of mouth, you also get better rates and better realization. So you saw some of these metrics in the description for the webinar, but I want to go over them again because I think they're very telling. In a fee and pricing benchmark report for the consulting industry in 2008, they found that the brand leading firms, and that was about a third of the firms that they surveyed, they had similar standard book rates and hourly rates to the non-brand leading firms, but they were realizing higher fees. And they realized them anywhere from 11% to 35% higher than the not very well-known firms. And the most interesting thing for me, that the highest level professionals in the firms, they were getting the 11% to 20% bump in the realization. But the biggest bump came from entry-level professionals, from your associate level. They were the ones getting that 35% bump in realization. And that's because they're unknown. So they're really banking on the brand of the firm. And that's where you really see the power of the brand to increase the profits of the firm at that level where a person has not established their personal reputation yet. Also in that same report, it showed that the brand leaders, 1/3 of the brand leaders, earned a profit of 30% or more in the past year, compared to only 15% of the lesser-known firms. So they're earning profits of 30% or more at more than twice the rate of the firms that don't have a strong brand. Brand leaders are more likely to have seen their annual revenue grow in the past 2 years. 93% of the brand leaders grew compared to 75% of the lesser well-known firms. That was in 2008 when everyone was still actually growing. So hopefully we're going to see those numbers again in 2012. There was also a study we looked at that was conducted in the mid-90s in the UK about brand name recognition in professional service businesses, that strong brand recognition meant that businesses could charge a 10 to 20% premium in their hourly rates. And then lastly, there was another 2003 study that looked at the variables that successful law firms shared. And one of the results that they said was that successful firms were united under a strong brand identity. So that's kind of the third point here, greater employee loyalty You've got a stronger, more united firm when you have a strong brand. And then in the middle, of course, your business development people know what to say a lot more clearly when your brand is well defined.
So we know at Ingenuity that a large part of your job is oftentimes having to argue your case about why you want to do certain initiatives, especially branding initiatives, because sometimes they're not as tangible as other initiatives. So if you would be interested in any of the statistics Rachel just talked about that would help you argue a case if you're trying to sell an initiative internally, feel free to email one of us at the end of the presentation and we can get you those studies and those statistics. Our emails are on the last slide here.
And I think you're going to see an opportunity to do an eval form at the end. And I think there's a text box where you can say, tell Rachel to send me those awesome stats, and I will happily shoot them off in an email to you. All right, so in preparation for this, we looked up return on marketing investment, which is a hot term sweeping the cybersphere. And this is from Wikipedia, how to calculate your return on marketing investment.
So now that you've looked at it, this is the place where you're supposed to say what now?
that was our response. We were like, okay, I can see that in some contexts this would be really valuable. You know, we're just going to figure out our incremental revenue attributable to marketing, what's the contribution margin, minus the marketing spending, and all of that's over the marketing spending. Now we have this really valuable number. But that's incredibly complicated, and most of you don't need that, and you don't necessarily need to spend the time that it would take to get this figure. Yeah, so I'm going to I could ramble on about this, but I'm looking at the time. Go to the next slide, Liz. I really like crazy statistics, you guys may have guessed. So that number also, it really plays into this top one. That's the short-term ROI of marketing. You know, when you look at the ROI of marketing, not just branding, but marketing as a whole, it really breaks down into short-term and long-term. And long-term is where your brand comes in, and short-term is kind of that formula we showed you on that last page, or a simplified version of it is what did we make in profits, what was the cost of the marketing, and kind of looking at the difference there as what the ROI of any marketing effort is. And that first one is really great to calculate for things like an ad spend. It's very easy to get a number on. We spent this much to place the ad, to design the ad, and from that ad we can tell that we made these 3 new sales. And then you have to take out your overhead and all of that. So that's where that contribution margin piece comes in, or basically profit. How much profit was on the sale? How much did we spend? Okay, great. That shows us the value of that short-term effort. And again, this is one of those things, if you need more information about calculating the short-term ROI of marketing, we have a lot of information about that. There's some great white papers online. So let us know if you need that. What we're really going to go on and talk about now is that long-term piece, because it's so much harder to identify and to justify, and it's so important. You know, so how do you really find the ROI of that long-term branding work?
This is where Rachel got to use a gargoyle in her presentation.
By now you've probably figured out I have a fondness for evocative photos and PowerPoints, because otherwise they get so boring, right? So one of the impacts of that long-term marketing, of having that strong brand, is that you develop a bigger pipeline into the hearts and minds of your prospects. So, you know, some firms are stuck at that phase on the right where you've got this tiny little pipeline, or on the left, the tiny little pipeline where you're trying to push your message out, but it doesn't look very appealing. People aren't really paying attention to it. They're kind of tuning you out. Where you want to be, of course, is on the right, where your messages can gush out over multiple channels, where prospects are willing to engage with you and really hear what you're saying and listen when you speak so that your message gets across to them. Another way to show this is that, you know, sales conversations can be thought of like internet bandwidth. So when you don't have a good brand, you don't have good bandwidth. But
we hope you guys are as entertained by the term bandwidth.
So, you know, you spend all this time and effort to get your messages out there. You think of them like web pages. If your prospects are not connected to your personal web pages because they don't have the bandwidth with you, they're not seeing those messages. They're not getting through. And there's a number of messages that track this, like engagement. We'll talk about that in a minute. Another piece, in addition to your brand width, that you can look at in terms of your branding is that marketing, and particularly your brand, is about efficiency. So here in this quote, Sean Jackson says, marketing is a process of decreasing the time, money, and resources required to communicate with customers and make it easy for them to buy products and services. So another place you're going to see lift from a strong brand is in a shortened time in terms of the sales cycle, in terms of attracting better clients. And again, we'll talk about that in the measurement section, but we wanted to whet your appetite for what a strong brand can really do for you. And then, of course, we want to talk about, well, how do you know if you have a strong brand? So here are some key elements of strong brands, and some of these come from the book Made to Stick, which remains one of my branding favorites. So some key elements are, is your brand really clear, and does it get to the core of what you do? You know, when you look at your brand messages, and of course I'm message biased because I'm the words person. When you look at the brand messages, we will have Liz represent design in a moment.
So that's why I was invited.
Yeah, well, that, and so the design department doesn't sack us later, right? But like in terms of your messaging, when you look at the messages that you're using internally, that your business development people are using, that show up on your website, are they clearly identifiable? And does it get to the core of what your firm does that's different from other firms? Secondly, are they unique and unexpected? You know, everyone wants to say things like service, quality, client relationship, excellence, leadership. If you use those words, you're just not going to stand out. So when you look at your brand, is it unexpected? Is it emotional? This makes it memorable. So are there some emotional qualities? And that doesn't mean melodramatic. It just means that there's a warm feeling, or there's some kind of sense of what it's actually like to work with you. Are they concrete? You don't want something that's too abstract because people are not going to connect with it. And then are they consistent? So you want to make sure that your messages and that the core of your brand is carried through everything that you do.
So this next slide talks a little bit about how Ingenuity goes about coming up with those key messages. So you'll see 4 circles here on the page. The first one being your firm. And so when we start a branding process to really come up with those key messages and key differentiators, we often ask, or we prefer to talk with your leadership and interview them about what they think is great about the organization, what they kind of want to see for the organization, what they think sets them apart. We also look at your current marketing materials and see what they're claiming, what you're already claiming is different about you. In addition, we also like to interview clients and prospects, and even sometimes referral sources, to talk to them about, for your A clients, we ask to interview your A clients, because when you're branding, you want to send out messages that are going to attract more A clients, the idea being that you want to attract more clients that you enjoy working with. So we ask your clients what they enjoy working about you, what they think sets you about from other service providers that they use in the same area, and kind of get their language around that. In addition, we research your competition to see what they claim is different about themselves. So we don't want to come up with key messages that are the same as what your competition is claiming, because obviously then those aren't differentiators. In addition, we look at your community.
Yeah, and in the community, that can cover a lot of things. Liz already mentioned referral sources. We look at how you've shown up in the mass media, now also how you're showing up online, how people are talking about you. Sometimes we can get a pretty good sense for how people who aren't directly clients or prospects perceive and are talking about your firm. And, you know, an interesting thing to note here, one of the reasons we put this great diagram up is not only, you know, this is how we discover a brand, but it's also how you can check the strength of your brand by going to these audiences and looking to see, are the messages that they're saying about us matching up with what we're saying about ourselves? What do they think about us? So this is one of the places where you can start to think about how you're going to measure the strength of your brand and what your brand is doing for your organization. And we got our first question. Congratulations to our first question asker, which is, will this be available later online? It absolutely will. We will have a recording of this available, and we can put the PowerPoint up or also email if anyone who wants a copy that way.
Before we move on, I just want to make sure that we really, when you're coming up with brand messages, we really want to make sure that all 4 of those circles are touched on. Oftentimes firms just want to start with or just use what their leadership thinks is different about them, and it's been our experience that often what the leadership claims is different about them is not what their A clients think is different and unique about them. So if you can only do some of those circles, do the leadership and definitely the clients, but it's really ideal if you could poll or interview all and look and survey all 4 of those. So now that you have your messages, they need to get used and integrated. So for the next several slides, we're going to show you some examples on how you can do that. First, we're going to talk about integrating your brand with design. So as we were putting together this PowerPoint, we asked our art department if they were having to create a brand from scratch, what would their process be? We didn't give them any intel on what we were already planning for the presentation, and unanimously the art department said they always like to start with key messages. They always reference those first. Again, those key messages are coming from the slides before where you're interviewing your clients and prospects and leadership. So they always like to use those. They like to use the words that the clients use, so they really ask us for the transcripts from the interviews. Typically, we give them a document with just the set key messages, but they also like to see those transcripts because they want to see the actual tone and language that people are using to describe the firm. It's also important to the designers to know how the client wants to be perceived, and that's different than how the clients think they want to be portrayed out in the market. They really want to know how they want to be perceived in the end game. And then color theory comes into play. So clearly color evokes emotion, and design should too. So you'll see the graphic on here is kind of a color theory chart, and it shows you what colors evoke what emotions. And so based on the key messages and the emotion and the experience of a service room is trying to evoke, our designers often reference a color theory wheel or graphic like this to make sure that those things are lining up. Clearly, design and branding is part trend. Trends are considered. But once the colors and fonts and shapes are identified based on the key messages, it's important that they get used in everything that gets done, internal documents and externally. You want to make sure that those things are getting repeated. If there's a shape or a glyph to your logo, make sure that those things are being considered. Even comes down to paper. We're working with an engineering firm right now, and paper for their stationery is a huge part of their branding process because it gives the texture and feel that they're trying to evoke. So here's an example of a law firm that we worked with, and you'll see down at the bottom what their logo is and what the glyph of their logo is. So this year, for the first time, they wanted to do an electronic holiday card, and so we were tasked with finding a service that we could find a template and customize it, and this one really stood out to us because of the present shape. They clearly reflect the shape of the logo, so that repetition is there, and we had them customize the gifts to be the same color as the logo. But one of their goals last year for the firm was to increase visibility and to cross-sell their services. So they have 5 different departments across 3 different offices. And often if a client in one office thinks of the firm, they only know that they do that one service. So it was really important to the firm this year to increase their brand visibility, which is why we kind of stuck with the firm colors and the logos for the card, as well as cross-selling. So if you were to mouse over any of these presents, the top would pop off, and underneath that would be the name of one of the departments. So the season's greetings from all of us at Measurely and Kramer, and then you'll see the 5 different practice areas as you mouse over and interact. The purple wallpaper kind of behind the card closely matches their website. Their website wallpaper is also purple. It's not the exact same design, but it's that deep purple. So again, we're repeating shape and color, and we're really reiterating their brand in their 5 departments in their holiday card. So this is a good, ask yourself, how much is your brand visually represented in everything you do? Oftentimes, and not that your brand has to be used all the time with a holiday card, it's actually a good time to shy away from your brand or to do a brand stretch. But if you're really trying to increase brand visibility, even incorporating it in this way, because it still has that holiday feel to it or that season's greetings feel to it, but still has a lot of the brand and visibility there.
And Liz brings up a great point here. I think we can already start talking about measurement tactics as we show you these examples, because that cross-selling feature of some internal branding work is actually huge for a lot of the firms that we work with. Firms can become very siloed, and there are amazing cross-selling opportunities that just aren't really getting used. So one place that you can show a lift in a branding process, if you go through a branding process or you strengthen up your brand, you roll it out internally, really look for cross-selling to go up and measure how much more, take a baseline, roll it out internally, measure out how much cross-selling has lifted as you roll that brand out internally, and you make people more aware not only of the other departments, but of the qualities that unify them. So someone in another service area might do very different work, but they might do it in the same way. They might do it with the same level of integrity, as everyone else in the firm. And that builds trust internally and can really show up in some growth and cross-selling.
Our next example is from a family law firm out on the East Coast. And we helped rebrand them a couple years ago, and we started with their website. So what you'll see here is an announcement card, which we've done several announcement cards. Their brand is really a strong, conservative brand. They want to attract high net worth individuals. And so they really have this rich, strong colors in their brand, the blue and the red and the gold. It's on all of their collateral materials, their website. When we do announcements for them, we use those same colors. But in addition to the colors and the fonts are the same on the announcement cards from the website, we also have a consistent tone. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about words in a little bit, but that's one of their brands, is that I would describe it as sassy and strong. Rachel did a lot of the writing. I don't know if she would describe it a different way. But that really is their tone, and they really want to make sure that people know who they are as people. So on their website, there's a tab on each of the partners' bios that allows them to talk a little bit about what they do in their spare time and kind of what they like to do outside of the office. So it's really important that the flavor of everything that gets written for them has kind of this interesting, sassy personality tone to it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can see operating here that that consistency of tone and kind of the tone that you want to engage with, a little bit sassy, playful, but also warm and powerful. You see that, and this is a good example also of that pipeline illustration we did earlier. Because the card asks a question, it's engaging, it's not just a straight-up announcement card, it earns more attention from the people getting it. So they're not just going to glance at it and toss it in the trash. They might actually look at it for a few seconds and be reminded of the firm.
Skipped ahead too. I apologize about that. So this next slide, Ingenuity actually just rebranded themselves. So we wanted to show it off a little bit, but we also think it's a good example of how to showcase repetition. So as you'll see, the Ingenuity logo, it wraps around our business card, and then the pictures to the right is actually a wall in our office, and you'll see that our logo actually wraps around the wall. You're going to see that same treatment in our proposals and a lot of the other stuff that we do. So our business development growth consultant, Christy Gusick, always says that it takes 14 touches in order to close a sale. So you need all 14 of those touches to be consistent, so they're seeing the same brand images, brand messages, so it's all consistent, and that message and brand is really getting pounded into their head. So even when you're thinking about brand, it's important to ask yourself how well your brand is represented in the physical space of an office, which was the next slide I accidentally hopped forward to. This is another law firm in town that just remodeled their whole interior office space, and their brand is everywhere. So when their attorneys are there, they're always working inside the brand. Their colors are that white and orange, and there's a splash of blue every so often. So if you go into their offices, all of their walls and everything is just this crisp, clean white with just punches of this orange. So you'll see their logo behind their receptionist and even in their furniture. But on the reception wall, they actually started highlighting case studies about the work that they do for their clients. And the tagline, Idea Savvy, came from some of the key messages that were created for them. So their brand really is immediate as soon as you walk in their office, and as you're walking around the office, it's everywhere.
And it's great to really have brand be that present for all the people in the firm. Wiz is getting happy with the clicker.
I'm clicker happy, Lord.
So when we train people in using their brand internally, one of the things we do is that how do you deal with the good to meet you, what do you do question. Because you have a lot of people in the firm who could be answering that in a way that drives business development. who now might just be saying, oh, I work at an accounting firm, I work at a legal firm, which is not very exciting. When you have a good, strong brand, they're more likely to say something compelling. So it's great if you're doing a brand effort and if you want to show the ROI of that branding effort, marrying it with some business development training for the non-rainmakers in the firm, and tracking to see if you get some lift from people who haven't had business development conversations before starting to have them. Are you seeing some new leads come in because people are now more eager to talk about what they do and talk about it in a way that's effective and engaging for people? And I wanted to give a couple examples of some key messages we did for clients, ways we taught them to talk about it, and then also the sales question at the bottom. So this key message is forthright. So one of our clients is extraordinarily forthright, which is a great quality. They say what's what and can be counted on for that. And we tell them you don't have to always use the word forthright. You can say, well, we're plain spoken. We're candid on behalf of our clients. And in meetings where they talk to the client stakeholders, they communicate clearly. So they can use any of those words to express that quality. And then we also really love the use of sales questions. So a sales question that points to this quality without advertising it is, tell us about the politics of the situation. Where could politics or opinions go wrong or get off track? So that's where someone can talk about how they really would appreciate engaging a firm that has a forthright quality. And my second example is a firm who is very good at making life transitions simple and seamless. Other ways of saying that, making the tough choices easier, making sure that you've got resources when the timing is right, so that awareness of the transition piece. And the way to create that as a question would be to say, how important is having resources available when you need them in your choice of an accounting firm? And again, you can see that the people in your office who are not the go-getters, not the rainmakers, if they got trained in using brand messages as part of a question, that might make it much easier for them to become part of the business development process.
So we're going to move into some more concrete ways on how to measure your brand. And I know you're probably glancing at these and thinking that you know these techniques already or have heard of them, and you probably have. But yet many of you, and I know sometimes here, we don't always implement them. So we're going to repeat them here and talk about them a little bit more. The first one being to hire an independent market research firm to see how your name moves up in the marketplace. So there are several consulting organizations that use this service. Again, if you want names of some, you can email me afterwards or put it on the survey and I can get you that information.
And one common way that firms who measure this go about it is to look at, what % of people out there are actually promoters. How many people are actually out there promoting your brand? How many passives do you have? They're your current customers that are susceptible to your competitors coming in because they're just passively engaging with you, but they're not really promoting you. They're not that familiar with your brand. And then do you have any detractors? Do you have customers who have voiced detraction, who might actually be out there actively harming your brand? So if you haven't done this in a while, or if you don't do regular client surveys, this can be very valuable. Or if you do, if you're one of the firms who does an annual client survey, you can break your survey results down by promoters, passives, and detractors, and kind of see what are those percentages as a baseline, and then track it as you improve the strength of your brand. Are the number of promoters going up and the number of detractors going down?
And for those of you that are intrigued by this idea, I did ask someone in town here that has used the service, an outsourced service to do this, and they said that for the independent market research company they use, they need 3 to 5 organizations to participate, and it costs each firm about $10,000. And each of those firms can give them a list of clients to interview or contacts to interview, and then they can add to that. And I think about 2,000 interviews need to be done in order for the research to be credible. So that was just some basic feedback I got a couple months ago from a firm that has used the service like that. Some other points to go further with what Rachel said about the surveys. You can do client surveys or even internal surveys. And some of the questions you would ask are, when you see our name, what qualities do you think of? Clearly you want answers that are going to match up with your key messages are, but those are some ways to measure if your brand is actually infiltrating your internal audience as well as your outside audience. Same with referral sources. You can ask them what they say when they refer you, what language they're using. Clearly, we talked about doing that when you were trying to identify a brand, but even if you've identified your brand and want to test if it's working, just asking your referral sources how they describe you is a good way to measure that.
Yeah, you can get some really excellent responses sometimes that will surprise you. Just by asking, when was the last time you referred us? What did you say about us? They may come up with some things that you had never thought of that become an important element of your brand.
The next slide has a few more bullet points. Clearly making sure that all your materials are consistent and have the same strong visual identity. When viewed together, they look like they're related. Again, we're talking about service sheets you're doing, your stationery, your business cards, your proposals, your holiday card, the holiday card example we gave you. Again, if you place that with all their other collateral systems, it's clear what their brand is.
And also, it's important to look over your online properties when you're doing this, because sometimes we work with firms where, for example, someone has gone off and made the firm Facebook page, and it doesn't have the firm brand on it. Or someone is using the firm name heavily on a personal blog that they're doing to promote themselves, but are not adhering to the visual graphic standards of the firm. So the blog is kind of distracting from the firm brand if people get there first.
Yeah. And if your firm becomes known for some element of its branding or identity, I know this is somewhat related. There's a law firm in town who's one of the main partners always wears a bow tie. And they've kind of embraced that, and I know in a recent ad that they did, they had all of the people in the ad wearing bow ties, so they've kind of have become known as the bow tie firm. So even just things like that can help with brand recognition. And the last bullet really is around engagement and how much time your customers spend interacting with your brand.
Yeah, and this is my transition point to the next slide, because that engagement is something you can really measure online very well. Because you can see, for a simple measure, for example, is the click-through rate on your own website and the amount of time people are spending on your pages. So, I hope you all have Google Analytics on your website or a similar tool, and that you're looking at that every month or two to really see, or more often. You're not going to get dinged to look at it more often, but at least every couple months, you really need to look at that and see, how many people came to our website, how much time did they spend there, what pages did they look at. Again, if you've done some internal branding, you're pushing it out on your website, you can see, well, wow, we changed our bio pages, and now people are spending a lot more time on them. So there are really an awful lot of metrics in the online space. So you want to make sure that you're choosing metrics that match your objective. So, you could say, okay, well, we want a whole bunch more Twitter followers. Well, if you didn't already sit there with an objective and say, okay, here's what we're going to do in this particular niche, and we know the people in this niche are on Twitter, and we want to get followed on Twitter by experts in this technology niche, for example. That's a meaningful online metric. That's a lot more meaningful than, well, let's double the number of our Twitter followers. Doubling the number of our Twitter followers is not a trackable ROI metric. Saying we want these thought leaders to be following us on Twitter in this industry where we're trying to increase sales, seeing those people follow you, and then seeing sales in that industry niche increase, those are important ROI metrics. Did we get questions?
We did get a question. So one question we got was, what kind of recommendations do you have in getting employees motivated to integrate our brand in daily life, specifically on the social web?
I'm a huge fan of contests. I think that, the two things on the top of my mind are, first of all, make it incredibly clear. So, for example, for ourselves, we have a simple one-page front and back persona sheet that describes our brand on each of the social media channels. Here's how our brand should show up on Facebook. Here's how it should show up on LinkedIn. So that people feel empowered when they're on that channel. They know what to say. And they know kind of what our personality is on those various channels. And then secondly, I'm a huge fan of a good contest. So we're actually running one in the office right now where we've got 3 teams who are allowed a certain number of social media posts per week. And whichever team's post drives the most engagement is the team that's winning for that week. And then there's a monthly, the winner for the month gets a Starbucks card. And, you know, it's a $10 Starbucks card. It's not that expensive, but actually it's gotten people really fired up and excited to post and to see, you know, and then once a week I report out what the metrics are. Here are all the things we posted, and here are the engagement metrics for each of them, so people can see the impact. So I think that you know, a lot of times we measure things in the marketing department, and sometimes we forget to feed it back to the firm. And when people see positive feedback, they get really excited. So showing positive feedback, engaging contests, and then making sure they're really clear on what to do so that they're not afraid they're going to mess it up.
Yeah. Well, and I think in addition to that, it's important to use the common areas in your firm. So we've worked with firms where once their key messages were identified, they took one message a month and really put up posters in their break rooms and in other common areas around the firm that kind of explained the message some more, gave those sample spoken uses, and really doing some training around how to use that in their own way is a good way to do that. And we do key message training right off the bat to get everybody on the same page, and so they can use those themes in a way that is comfortable for them. But to just do that and never address it again is where it's going to fall off. So even to do a refresher training, or again to put up posters in those common areas, things like that.
All right, I think we can hit the next slide. I think you had to double click it. I keep messing with Liz's computer. I'm probably driving her crazy.
Stressful. Welcome to my life at Ingenuity.
It's true. We all come in and mess with Liz because she's so organized and we're so not. So here are some ways you can measure your brand online. Obviously, search engine rankings. If there are some phrases that you're going for, I don't recommend going for a phrase like accounting. That's just going to be heartbreak and a lot of money. But you know, if you have some specific niches and what you're doing, like the marketing campaign, I would marry with that is we're going to do a lot of articles. We're going to get some guest blog posts. We're going to get a bunch of articles placed online. They're going to have these keyword phrases in them. They're going to position us as experts. They're going to link back to our site. You should see that in your search engine rankings. That should be a really easy way to show that that's working. And then, of course, you also have to be working with your business development people to track, are you getting calls based on these articles? Because if you let that slip through, then you're going to miss your ROI measure for that. So, you know, how did someone come to us? Did they see the articles? Did that generate a call? Particularly in a niche, that can be really valuable because that's where expertise can really shine. Likes, +1 and followers. I addressed that a little on the last slide. You know, you can't just say, well, let's get 100 more Facebook likes. All right, that is not the most valuable ROI metric. If you say, okay, let's put a welcome page on our Facebook with a lead capture form. Let's capture some lead information from the people who are liking us and feed that into our business development system and watch how those leads play out. That's wonderful. That will automatically feed into some ROI metrics for you. Landing page traffic. It's so easy to put up landing pages, so you can even do, if you're doing a print ad campaign, how many people came to the landing page from the print ad, from the holiday card, from the collateral we sent out, from the thing we gave out at the trade show. Driving people to a landing page where hopefully you've got a lead capture form and they're downloading. Again, you can track those leads through the sales funnel and see if they were valuable. Website traffic I discussed already. Watch that, see if it goes up. We love that. And then number of comments or engagement. So that's a more valuable statistic on Facebook actually than likes, is engagement. So okay, on our Facebook page we're posting out small business tax information and people are sharing it and talking about it. That's a nice valuable metric.
I blame Rachel.
It's true.
So our next slide is to talk about the brand impact on successful proposals. So as I mentioned earlier, you saw the visual Ingenuity just refresh into our brand. You saw our business cards and the refreshed look. But what we also did as part of that process is we redefined what our best clients look like. So we came up with the characteristics of what our A clients have in common, and that helped us define who our best clients were. So now when our business development person goes out, she can better qualify prospects earlier in the process based off of this set criteria, which saves a ton of time because we know who we work best with. It helps Christy cut people out sooner. We also are clear on our value proposition, so we can quickly in an RFP articulate our differentiator and what sets us apart. Again, you're going to see those same differentiators in that same brand through our LinkedIn profiles, our website, our proposal. Again, that whole 14-touch thing, you want to make sure the messaging and the look of the brand is consistent in everything that you're communicating to these prospects. And our messages drive our sales questions as well. Rachel gave a couple examples of that earlier. So we really try to come up with questions in the sales process that will get people to articulate what their pain is in a way that we can talk about our messages as a way to solve that pain.
So generally, some of the metrics here that you can track are, let's say you refresh your brand, you push it out for your business development people, and suddenly you see that the sales cycle is getting shorter. Great ROI metric there. Or you have a higher close rate. Another great thing to track. Or that your average sale is going up. Those are all pieces that brand ROI can have a share in. Obviously, you want to acknowledge your business development people as well, but making them aware of the fact that, okay, the brand work that we did is shortening your sales cycle. It's getting your proposals accepted at a higher rate. That can make a huge difference. And we actually got a question, which is how often should you consider rebranding?
Ooh. Rachel says 3.
Okay, 3. Well, 3 years. What?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I would agree with that. And I don't know that rebranding is as much of a refresh of your brand.
I think it's, I would say 3 years is my glove answer, but really it's about the strength of your brand. And it's about, let's say, for example, that you have a moderately strong brand, that you've been doing annual client surveys, and you can see that your brand is actually feeding out pretty well to your clients. Then you might just do a refresh. You might just kind of look over everything and say, are there areas that our brand hasn't fed out to, or are there messages that we're missing that we should incorporate? Is there something our referral sources is saying about us that we're just missing? If you feel like your brand is not strong, obviously you want to rebrand sooner. It depends on the strength.
And there's also going to be triggering events, clearly, like a merger, acquisition, or one of the reasons we rebranded is because our Ingenuity has grown and our ideal client has become different and bigger. So if you're in a major growth mode, rebranding is probably necessary more often because you're going to want to be attracting different types of clients as part of that growth. So,
all right, I'm going to add one more thing before I let's go to the next slide, which is, in all of the different measures that we've mentioned, and we'll talk about a few more, it's very important to sort of plan your goals ahead of time. And, when you have a clear definition of what the goals are, for example, we want to go into these niches, or we want to attract this kind of client, then you know what to measure based on that. And you have to make sure that the measurement is occurring in time. You don't kind of want to leave it open-ended. And then you need to tune based on the measurement. That's what I love about all the online measurements is you can like with our competition we've been doing where we're putting out the different across the different social media channels and looking at the kind of engagement we're getting. Well, now we have a better and better sense of what kinds of stories to put out there and what kinds of engagement we're seeing on, say, Facebook versus LinkedIn. So it lets us tune our messaging over the different channels. So make sure that not only have you planned out your goal and you've identified what your measurement is, but then on that back end you've got the sense for, okay, we got the measurement in. We ran this campaign in the manufacturing niche, and we saw that these pieces gave us great lift and this piece over here didn't. So let's drop that for next time, and let's tune this so that it's even more efficient.
All right, so this kind of addresses a question that was asked earlier too, but ways to strengthen that internal brand. So we have a few tips on how to really get your brand embraced internally. And part of that is if you're redesigning your collateral is to throw away absolutely all the old stuff. Now, I know that that's probably not environmentally friendly, but if you're really wanting to embrace the new brand, you really need to throw away all that old stuff. So when that just happened here at Ingenuity, our designers made us have a scavenger hunt at the team meeting where we all had to go collect as much of the old stuff, including our business cards, note cards, envelopes, that we could find with the old brand and literally pile it into the table at the team meeting. Another idea that we've suggested is to, especially for engineering firms or construction firms, this might work well, but to have them take their old business cards and create a bridge out of them, and whoever comes up with the biggest bridge or the most sound bridge wins a prize. So to tie it in ways like that as well to make it kind of fun. Another idea is to create a strong style guide and brand document. So you'll see a picture here of Ingenuity Style Guide where our design department has detailed out the fonts in our logo, the colors, the Pantone colors, what we should be using when we're using what kind of document. They also have created a library of master documents. So when we all start writing a memo in Word, we're supposed to go to we all go to a master documents folder and work from that template so that our Ingenuity logo is always in the same area. The footer looks the same on everything. We have master templates for PowerPoints, for memos, for proposals. There's a whole library of things that we just know to start from to keep it consistent.
We just got a question. Are we willing to share our style guide?
Sure.
So should people, if you want to see a copy of our style guide, write that in the evaluation form?
Yeah, that would probably be best.
Yeah, just write a little note. Please send us a copy of the style guide. And then you too can adhere to Ingenuity style.
And then another thing was to use internal surveys and contests. So I think Rachel had a good story around that.
Yeah, there was a firm that we were working with doing a big rebranding, about 140 people in the firm. You know, and so the decision makers for the branding process was about a dozen people. So they were really looking for, well, how do we, you know, the other 128, how do we keep them involved? And so doing an internal survey once we were pretty far down the road, and we could say, okay, here are some of the top key messages we're considering. Which do you think are the strongest? To give the other people in the firm a chance to give feedback on that and feel some ownership in what the final messages turned out to be. That can be a nice way when you're in the middle of a process to get more buy-in from the whole firm.
The next slide on ideas on how to strengthen your internal brands. The first one being brand ambassadors. And what I'm talking about there is the support staff. Especially with service firms, I think that the support staff often get overlooked when it comes to educating on what brand is. And they're most often the ones that are on the front line, also having a lot of client communication. So it's important to engage them and educate them on what your brand messages are and what your brand consistency is, because if they're not interacting with your clients, they're probably helping draft those memos or work those documents. So you want to make sure that the visual brand is actually passed on to them so they know how to keep that consistent. So even if you create a fun committee and they're the ones in charge of posting the key messages in the break areas based on the idea I talked about earlier, or doing some things like that really to engage them and make sure that they're educated on what the firm's trying to accomplish. Another idea is to literally put your firm messages on your wall. So there's a picture here of a CPA firm here in town that just moved into some new space, and as part of that, they created this brand wall where they have these words that they claim as their brand or that are really important to the experience that they want to deliver to their clients and referral sources. And then the other thing was just to have events that live out key messages. So we do this a lot at Ingenuity. One of our key messages is that we're strategic. So even the example Rachel gave you about the social media contest has some strategy underlying to it. And we also do Secret Santa here at the office, and there's a lot of strategy and behind the scenes, what is the term I'm looking for? Like shenanigans, probably, that we're going for.
So a strategic and well planned out Secret Santa as we have in our office.
Rachel and I, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you'll have to ask us that story another time. It got crazy this year.
I think we only have a few minutes left, so we probably shouldn't tell them. But all right.
Last slide.
All right, quick start measures. For those of you who want to, hit the ground running, what do we recommend? Take a baseline right now. Go see what you can measure. Look at your Google Analytics. Look at how long the sales process takes on average, close rates, all of that. Just take a baseline of where you're at right now. Objectively assess the strength of your brand. Decide if you need to take some branding steps. Make specific goals that occur in time, and I would say no more than 5, maybe even 3. Specific, this is what we're going to go after. This is how we're going to measure it. Create yourself a dashboard. It can be really simple. Word document, Excel spreadsheet, easy way to track it. And then make sure that you learn from the measurements and you tune and improve so that it becomes a cycle. And I think Liz says we have a question.
We do. So we got a question, how do we feel about transitioning new brand elements in by keeping some of the old elements while you put things in place? Old elements like logos, colors, phrases.
It makes us cry a little. You want to click to the next slide so they can see our email while we answer that? This is our email, so if you have questions after this, you can always shoot us emails. It actually depends. I mean, with some clients that we work with, we're not completely redoing the brand. We're doing what we call a brand stretch, where we're taking the existing brand and we're just freshening it up. So they're not getting a completely different logo. They're getting a modernized version of the logo that they had. So in that case, I think there is this transition. There is this sort of overlap period. The only thing that actually makes us cry is when we go through an awesome rebrand, we completely redo everything, and it's gorgeous and wonderful, and they have collateral from the early 1990s, and someone insists on still taking it to a sales meeting. Then we get sad. But I think it depends on how radically you're changing the brand. I mean, obviously, if you're changing it radically, you want to get rid of that old stuff. But otherwise, you can do a transition period.
Yeah. Ideally, if you're rebranding everything, the website, the collateral, our recommendation would be to launch that all at the same time, which I know can get anxious. I know there's a firm we're working with that we have finished all their collateral and it's ready to start using, but their website's not going to be done for a couple months. And our recommendation was to just wait on the collateral and launch everything at the same time, again, for that consistency point that we talked about throughout the presentation. So I know it's like now that you have new collateral and new brand, it's like kids on Christmas and you just want to start using it and you're excited, but it's better to launch it all new at one time if you can.
Do we have any other questions, or should we start thanking people?
It looks like we answered all the questions.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you so much for being our lovely studio audience for this webcast. I hope that we gave you some really great things to think about, and as always, feel free to email us with questions or thoughts. We'll try to get this recording up online in the next few days so that you can look at parts of it again. And please fill out that eval form. We'd love to know how we're doing, especially since we can't see or hear you right now. It means a lot to us to give us some feedback because we actually really want to deliver great webinars. So thank you again. Have a great afternoon and a wonderful cloudy winter day if you're in Minnesota.